and welcome to the ID5 podcast, How to Thrive in the Cookieless Present. I'm Joanna Burton, the Chief Strategy Officer at ID5. For this podcast series, we're talking to a range of identity pioneers who are sharing their findings, case study results from real tests into the effectiveness of cookieless technology. There's a lot of change in digital advertising at the moment with the deprecation of the traditional signals we use for digital advertising to address audiences. There's changing regulations, there's the influence of big tech players, coming economic changes. Advertisers and publishers can already see that they are missing out on the opportunity to work with users in cookieless environments such as Safari, Edge, and Firefox. And what we see is there's really a lot of talk about this, but on the podcast series today, we're really talking about actual results, speaking with a range of pioneers, a range of experts who've run tests, analyzed results, and looking at what really works and what doesn't to be able to share learnings. We just hope that this will be useful for you to be able to apply these strategies, take these learnings, and navigate the cookieless future for you. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Fernandes from Havas, one of the leading agencies leaning into cookieless advertising around the world with ID5. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Joe. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Before we dive into the details, tell me a little bit about yourself and your role at Havas.
Sure. It's been a while now at Havas, and it's been a great journey working across smart people and great minds. Having started latter half of 2015, across programmatic predominantly. My remit now at Havas includes owning the programmatic teams and paid social across data and operations. Largely in my job is having conversations with clients on what their transformation across digital is. So, it's the fun aspects of chatting about things unknown, evolving circumstances from an industry perspective. What AdTech and infrastructure do I need? It's great though, because I think that's what excites me. I mean, it's about coming into the office every day and literally not knowing how the rest of your day is going to be, rather than just going, well, this is the world that we live in. That's the beauty about my job and what I love doing every day.
Constantly being agile.
Mm-hmm.
And iterating. Okay, so let's start. As a whole, what steps has Havas taken to future-proof your addressability strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question to kick things off. What we're trying to do as a business here is to get a single view of a consumer. Now, especially in digital, it's extremely hard for us to actually get your planning audience, match your buying audience. Like, we use traditional platforms to plan and strategize. And then once a client signs off, we go back to our buying platforms, what we call DSPs, to try and replicate the strategy. As a business, we've invested in our audience platform called Converge, which sits at the heart of every decisioning framework. So, it sort of goes back to our fundamentals of meaningful media, ensuring the fact that data is critical at every decisioning and channel investment, whether it's programmatic out of home or display or social. We are capturing those data triggers that can help actually define the different stages of the CDJ.
Great. Okay. And then talking now specifically about identity and your approach to identity. So you have your Converge platform. I know that you have been using Converge to run tests looking at the effectiveness of identity. Can you take me through your recent tests?
Sure. I think, as a platform, Converge is designed to not just, answer the challenge of what a brand needs to know about their first-party data in terms of insights, but it's also trying to get a peek into, what future-proof looks like in the world of no cookies, right? And what we're proud of as a market is to take, at this end-to-end sort of cookieless activation that we did with one of our clients, Baiada. The approach there started off with our brand going, well, I'm glad to have this conversation about how I can own and know more about my data, but also let's try and see how I can get in front of my consumer in an extremely clustered market, right? Like, as a brand in a category of FMCG, you're competing with ridiculously high amounts of budgets in an already sort of saturated market like Australia. And for us, it was trying to see how we can get in front of those consumers. Putting an identity lens on, I think we wanted to ensure the fact that we can actually start seeing how can we get in front of a consumer who has Safari or who uses Safari as a browser and Firefox. And what was fundamental for us was to ensure the fact that everything was done in a privacy compliant manner. So yes, it included opt-ins. The idea was not to sort of, try and get an answer to what a world looks like without cookie. It was just into trying and getting a bit more progress into these are the potential solutions that are out there of how we can capture market share with just being smart. And more importantly, increase our reach across audiences who don't use Chrome as a browser. So, we know it's a fact that in the past couple of years, Apple have come out with sort of, opt-outs for third-party cookies. So there is a world that already exists. Why aren't we talking about those consumers? So in Australia, it was obviously the penetration of Apple consumers is less here as compared to sort of Android devices. But for us, it was trying to get a lens into the unknown out there with this test that we did using ID5 as an identity provider for us.
Okay, so the test was across mobile and web.
It was across predominantly mobile devices that we had. So we measured sort of, the uplift in terms of engagement rates, but then more importantly, what were we getting from, I guess, a CPM perspective? So, what was the cost of impressions of serving on publishers who had ID5 being passed in their bid request? And then more importantly, what was the uplift in terms of reach? So yes, the relevancy matters, right, to a brand. And this comes back again to the brand being open to these tests. Like Baiada as a brand as well, you wouldn't think that a poultry brand would be at the forefront of this test. But what they are changing is the fact that the experience on site is now just not going to a Lilydale website. It's going actually to a website that has recipes out there. So the consumer journey is changing. So it's all driving that relevancy aspect and finding these little pockets of consumers who are in that moment and relevant to the brand right now that we try to ensure that we are capturing with this test.
Great. So the brands that Baiada was promoting in this test was Lilydale's and Steggles?
It was Lilydale. No, it was only on Lilydale as the first. So they've got Lilydale's and Steggles as part of their sort of, two brands that they own. And back then when we tested this out, it was across Lilydale. Now we've started the annual sort of planning and activation for both Lilydale and Steggles, and the approach is to sort of get them across both of their ventures out there.
Okay, great. And so back to what you were saying earlier. So you were looking at a couple of things, reach and CPM. So with regards to reach, you said there's a lot of noise, a lot of battle for attention, but you were able to focus with this test on promoting the brand in browsers where there's much less noise because many brands are not promoting in that area, not advertising in that area because they're not using cookieless technologies at the moment, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that to us was fascinating, both not just from an agency perspective, but more importantly, from a brand perspective as well, right? I think the hesitancy always comes down to not being the first in market about these things because, yes, it is innovation, but at the same time, then it opens yourself up to a whole host of questions on privacy and compliance and all of those things, which, yes, is fundamental to every test that happens out there. But more importantly, it's just probably letting what happens a bit under the hood, right? Like, as an industry, probably we've all held our cards close to our chest when it comes to sort of, the programmatic buying, but we've all ended up in that same scenario where we've got conversations with the ACCC on, well, what's transparency? What's the black box algorithm which optimizes stuff? Whereas for us here, it was, we're all in this together in terms of what a future-proofing solution looks like from identity perspective. Let's share learnings. Yes, there will be some USPs and some sort of key initiatives which agencies use as a competitive advantage. But at the same time, let's try working towards potential sort of common denominators out there across the programmatic world when probably cookies fade away. And yes, flock and content and every other form of advertising is important as well. But that's no different to what it was with cookies as well. The contextual relevancy has always been in the business. We've never reinvented the wheel out there.
Great. So let's talk about results. If you're not sharing, if you're not keeping your cards close to your chest, let's talk about the results. So you focused on Lilydale's, you collected first-party data, you worked with PubMatic on some of the publishers that we've activated with ID5 in the region, like News Corp and Daily Mail. What were the results?
Yeah. Great. I think from a results perspective, look, I think just straight off the bat, like we've seen a 16% uplift in terms of user engagement. Now that from an engagement point of view was a click through the website. Yes, it is, the landing page visits, but I think for us, importantly, the definition of success here was trying to say if users at the end were engaging with your brand, or are we actually even hitting the right audience out there? This was a great start for us because, it showed that there is actual proof in the pudding in terms of reaching those audiences across browsers where third-party cookies are stopped. And again, we compared this with a cookie-based strategy as well. So, it was for like, let's test out the same audience and see if there's an uplift in terms of engagement. Now, in terms of the reach of the audience, we improved the campaign overall by about 5%. So that was, again, extra 5% of consumers that we were able to reach out there with an identity-based solution. Now, all of these are restricted with the amount of bid requests we've got here from publishers. That's the important thing to keep in mind. We've got demand that we sort of as an agency are at the forefront, but at the same time, it's time for, I guess, publishers, right, to start increasing identity sort of that they pass in their bid requests as well. And it's great that ID5 has been leading the way in Australia out here, being one of the sort of top identity solutions that are being passed in the bid request. So for us, it was a no-brainer of actually getting out there in market with ID5 as the first identity and testing it out there across publishers like News Corp and Daily Mail. I think the other sort of call out for us was within Safari browser itself, the engagement sort of improved massively by 19 times as compared to a traditional cookie-based sort of prospecting strategy. So mind you, this is a cookie-based approach across Chrome compared to the Safari with the same targeting out there. So the drastic sort of change for us, again, was just to peek into, well, what success metrics could look like. Of course, like I'm not going to sit here and deny the fact that there are sort of challenges on privacy. There is challenges on measurement and attribution that we all need to sort of wrap our heads around. But again, it was for us trying to get a step in the right direction of how can we sort of reach those consumers or new consumers in an already clustered market by just doing these smart tweaks that, yes, we always talk about these things in panels and sort of shows. And I think I've listened to about 500 podcasts in the world without cookies, but no one's actually done it, which surprises me, which is awesome for us. But I think that's what sort of excited both Yash at Baiada and myself as well at Havas.
I think you make a good point there. So I do think there's more tests happening than people talk about, but being able to share the results so that other people can learn from that, I think is really helpful. You did mention, though, that there were challenges. I think one of the challenges, there's a lot of partners involved in any case study and in test environment. So you worked with Pubmatic, with the media owners that we've talked about. There's this yourself and your team at the agency, and then also the client. You mentioned the client briefly. So how did you, and also Converged and the tech partners in Converged, how was it to bring all these partners together?
Yeah, it was much, I guess, harder than I'd initially sort of anticipated, to put it mildly. But I think, look, when you sort of go into the unknown, you have to have those things of testing and trialing, right? That's the important thing out there as well. There's no sort of fit solution out there for something that's never been done. And I think it was sort of a breath of fresh air that, the client was on board with this testing as well, right? There was no sort of timelines that we had. We knew the parameters that we were playing on. Now, to begin with, it was important for us to get the Converge pixel on the client's website as well to ensure the fact that, we were collecting the required identity of people landing on the website. So that was us doing our due diligence from a tagging perspective out there and ensuring, look, we've got these set of ID5 users who are on the Lilydale website. Now, when you have your programmatic hat on, you go, well, I've got demand, surely there's supply, and I can just match them in a DSP of choice. Well, that was not as easy as I made it sound, because we had supply as well that were passing through our sort of media partners and SSP in Pubmatic, but there was a decryptor that our media platform, MediaMap, had to sort of build to actually connect those two dots together. So what seemed a much more sort of simplistic solution in reality was far more sort of, you had to jump through those hurdles out there to get it working. But look, I think it's a good start, right? I mean, we've now laid down the foundation for similar other tests, which I think, you don't need to reinvent the wheel again. You've got that technology built out there. There is sort of a mapping of ID5 from both the demand and the supply side that we can take credit of leading the way in terms of building. So I think there were some challenges, I'd say, but I think it was comforting knowing once we had everything live, it was sort of exceeding what we had kept in mind in terms of performance.
Yes, it's important to note that that ID that comes through from the publisher via Pubmatic, it's retrieved by Pubmatic from all the publisher sides. That ID doesn't contain any of the publisher's data, any personal data about the publisher's customers, and also the ID is encrypted. That also helps with data protection. It's also, that's our business model. It's then able to be decrypted by MediaMath as part of Converge, working with you guys and the other tech partners. So that enables you to ensure that you're protecting the consumer's data, you're protecting the publisher's data as well, and also having this access to understanding the technology in a new way.
Yeah, and that's a great point you raised there, Joe, because I think, look, I think as much as we probably as agencies and practitioners, right, try and get up to speed in terms of privacy compliance, I think you guys, they are the gatekeepers, right? Like you have the infrastructure in place to ensure the fact that there is everything ticked from a privacy point of view. And I think that's what was resounding to know that, look, the due diligence and the homework has been done, right? Like, and I think that to us as well was another sort of comforting factor. Obviously, we are sort of now diving into worlds unknown with regards to privacy compliance and opt-ins and, ensuring the fact that a user sort of consented in terms of data collection. But I think it was good for us to know that the technology at the publisher end, which you guys played a part in, was actually done in the right way of collecting that information and passing only the required information for us to have that bid request match done. So it's something that I guess we need as an industry to start speaking about more, because the most common thing that you compare it then to is fingerprinting, and it's not that. Like, the important thing is that you've got users who opted in, and at publisher end, you are only passing the required information when it comes to a bid request, nothing else from a publisher side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to be transparent as well with all parties. And that's what you're doing here. So on the subject of transparency, any other learnings that you had from this project?
Yeah, look, I think there's tons, right? I think the first one is ensuring the fact that you've got a willing client. I think that's super important. Yes, again, we just recently came off Ad Week out here in Sydney, and it was refreshing again to sort of, go into sessions knowing, be curious, like, stay up to date with what's happening. There's sandbox laws and privacy compliances, and there are a lot of open box solutions that are out there you can stay sort of abreast with. But at the same time, you got to have someone who sort of believes in where innovation is heading towards. I mean, that's the biggest learning for us, because you can take it as a solution to your marketers, but they need to ensure that they trust you with, their budget, because it's not test budget. It is their budget that's coming out from their marketing dollars out there. And the other learning was trying to make sure we increase the knowledge when it comes from a publisher point of view. I think the adoption rate in Australia can be improved massively. Again, we shouldn't be going back again a few steps when it comes to programmatic and building walled gardens, right? Like, yes, we've got Google and Facebook, which are walled gardens in its true sense. But out here in Australia, it's a bubble when it comes to the industry. And the more we sort of share, the more we sort of, get out there from both an adoption point of view of identity, and the more openly we talk about it, the more better it is from, I guess, an agency and an advertiser point of view, because we shouldn't be having conversations on, well, if I have demand, I can go and sort my supply. It should best be there at the onset. And I think from a DSP or a buying platform point of view, it's my best advice is having those conversations with, your teams out there, right? It's like the solution has to be built. Right? Like, yes, everything sounds fairly simple, because programmatic in its true sense is actually real-time buying, and the technology has to be there for a buying platform to actually execute it. But this is a bit into the unknown. So those three are sort of where my key learnings were, and always like continue learning, I suppose, right? I mean, there's no sort of future-proof one size fits all solution.
That's the joy of digital advertising, always learning.
True.
So what's next then? So you've got these learnings. It's clear that you've been able to bring some different partners together. You've worked closely with the client at Baiada. How will you apply these learnings at Havas?
Yeah, look, I think for us, it's again, moving into that direction of having a single view of a consumer, right? That's the important thing for us. And identity is another sort of, I guess, uncovering a bit more of your consumer, which sort of drives towards that single view. Like the objective is, how can I follow my consumer across different parts of my CDJ, right? Like, and that's what we get paid for, right? From a strategy and a planning point of view. So it was steps in the right direction. Look, I think we as an agency as well are both media and identity agnostic. For us, it's continued testing that I personally like doing as well. So again, while this test was successful for us, it's now about finding, well, sweet, what can I get from here that I can use as a starting point in terms of testing other solutions out there. Again, while keeping privacy, while keeping data consent at the central of everything. And hopefully, you know, like we get to a place where we are not at the end of 2023 having conversations on, well, I don't know what a world looks like without cookies. So just let's contextually target content. Well, marketers need to be pushing agencies of finding solutions. Yeah? Like, and that's the most important thing. Agencies have the privilege of working with multiple brands and categories, and it's not the same for everyone. But it's important that as agencies, we start having these conversations with our marketers on how they can understand their first party data now, if not 6 months ago. So that's my sort of key takeaways into what we are progressively having chats with. And look, this test has sort of uncovered those conversations for us across other clients who are probably hesitant to get on that journey, right? Like not many, I'd say, want to be the first one out there in the market to test it out, because yes, it's fascinating, but at the same time, you have opinions that are thrown around going, well, is it the right way to do it? Is it fine? So you sort of, now that we've got that proof in the pudding, we now set the foundations of getting other clients on board and, you know, coming on that journey of identity, right? Like that we know is the future, or is one of the potential future solutions out there. It's just now laying those foundation blocks in place.
Why do you think other companies are not moving as fast as you?
I think everyone is, all right. I think there is a tendency, I guess, across the industry when it comes to programmatic, that there are always concerns over transparency and privacy. And, you know, I guess in the 15 years that I've worked in advertising, I constantly dislike the word programmatic being sort of associated with the remnant inventory. And it's not, well, but we still live in that era, right? And I think now when we're trying to build innovations and technology solutions out there from an identity basis, we're leaps and bounds ahead of where programmatic is still being sort of perceived. It's a misconception, in my opinion. And for us, it was trying to have progress before perfection, but we're never going to get to that, or we'll get on that journey to getting to that perfect place. But I think as brands, again, we are custodians of actual marketing budgets, and it's ensuring the fact that we are delivering not just media metrics, but also business objectives, right? And whatever test we do should always have that business objective that's underpinning every solution out there. So yes, there are some who are more than happy to put their hands up. There are some that go, well, I'm happy to put my hand up once I've seen a few others test it. And then there are some who probably, well, they will get on that journey, but it'll take some convincing, because, well, that's the only sort of solution up ahead.
Yeah, so there's different 3 stages of approach that you're, but as you say, it's an opportunity to have this much better engagement.
Yeah, and that's the beauty, I think, about it, right? That was the key takeaway, right? Like it was, I was speaking to a platform, and it was a startling fact that probably like the Nordic regions have close to about 80% of consumers who use Apple devices. Well, they live in a world of blocked third-party cookies, if I'd say so, right? Like it will happen at some point. So it's about like not just cross-agency learnings, but also sort of cross-country learnings. What's happening in different countries where you've got these privacy laws out there, you've got blocking of third-party cookies. And I guess that's the benefit of us working as a global agency as well, right? Like the access to information is not just from an Australian lens, but it's also working with our counterparts in France and London that sort of exposes us to advanced ways of working where probably, frankly, in Australia, we're probably a few steps behind.
That's a really good point, Kevin. So I see that working at a global company as well. Every market is different with different dynamics and different people and different approach to innovation, but being able to share those global learnings from multiple countries and keep moving forward is the really exciting part.
Yeah, and I think the benefit about testing these in Australia, firstly, like we're miles away from everybody, which is awesome. But I think the other bit is the scale factor, right? Like, you know, when you try and test something in a market like the US and the UK, you could, I'm not saying that it happens, but you could sort of get it mixed in the noise, right? Like, because there's so much of scale, there's so much of consumers, there's so much of category, I guess, verticals and brands out there that you don't know what you're testing. Whereas here in Australia, we sort of have that approach where we go, well, what's phase one, right? Like, let's get X percentage of a budget, but then sort of held ourselves accountable of having limited partners, having that limited sort of idea of what success looks like, and then just being transparent with the client. Look, at the end of the day, it's not about trying and making ourselves look great. I mean, we've got brands who we work with who work with us because they trust us, and that's the important thing. That it's important for us to take knowledge, it's important for us to take innovation, it's important for us to take industry learnings to them so that they can be on this journey of trial and test with us as well.
Great. So to sum up, we're talking about transparency and trust between you and your client, but also with the consumer and the media owner. We're talking about test and learn and then applying the learnings. You have seen the results, increased engagement and other results as well with driving traffic to the Lilydale's website. So therefore, you have the results that maybe other people can now follow and benefit from. And finally, a call to publishers to get more involved with identity strategies because you're bringing the demand.
Yeah, and we hope probably in the past couple of weeks, these sort of releases going up sparks that conversation, right? Like the idea again is not to go, well, this is the holy grail. It's the idea going, well, let's spark that conversation, right? Like as a marketer, have that conversation with your agency. As an agency, have that conversation with the platforms and the partners who you work with. Get those sort of foundation blocks in place. And we really hope to sort of emulate the start that we've got across sort of the other guys in the agency as well. That's the important thing for us. And for us, it's now taking these learnings and results to the other brands that we work at as well, not just from a local point of view, but also from a global Havas point of view as well.
Kevin, it's been really great to hear all about your journey from the initial planning to being able to execute the learnings that you had, the response from your client Baiada, how you've been able to share that with the wider Havas team. So thanks very much for joining the ID5 podcast, Kevin.
Thank you for having me, Joe.